Chosen one, perhaps you were placed there to see, not to wait to be seen. There is a kind of loneliness that only truly reveals itself when you're standing in the middle of a room filled with laughter. Not the loneliness of being by yourself within the familiar comfort of four walls, but the loneliness of standing in a crowd, surrounded by lively conversations, warm embraces, and joyful reunions, while no one walks over to greet you, and not a single pair of eyes lingers long enough to ask, "How have you been?" This kind of loneliness is much harder to talk about than simply being alone, because if you told someone that you felt lonely in the middle of a crowded party, they might look at you with confusion, or worse, assume you're exaggerating. After all, you were surrounded by people. How could you possibly be lonely? But you know the feeling is real, even if no one else can see it. Chosen one, if you've ever stood in a room like that, a crowded celebration, a family gathering, or a company event, and felt almost invisible, then these words are for you. I'm not going to tell you that next time everyone will gather around you. I'm not going to promise that the people who walked past you that night will someday come back, regret overlooking you, or suddenly recognize what they missed. Those promises may sound comforting, but no one has the right to make promises about a future that no one can control. Instead, I'd like to invite you to consider another possibility, one that asks a different question about what it really means to stand at the edge of a crowded room. Stay with me for a little while, not because you're afraid of missing something, but because perhaps this is the first time someone has invited you to look at that feeling from an angle you've never considered before. Imagine a stage illuminated by a single spotlight. Everyone notices the person standing in that beam of light. Meanwhile, the rest of the room remains in shadow. The room is still full of people. Conversations are still unfolding. Lives are still present. The only difference is that the spotlight isn't shining there. In Genesis 16:13, we meet a woman named Hagar, wandering in the wilderness, convinced she had been completely forgotten. Many believers read this passage as a reminder that, in the very place where she believed she was most alone, she gave God a name. The God who sees me. Chosen one, before we go any further, there's something important to understand. Not standing beneath the spotlight doesn't mean you don't exist in the room. The spotlight has limits. Human attention has limits. But your existence is not limited by wherever the light happens to fall. Think about how a concert works. The stage lights shine on the lead singer, the pianist, and the musicians. Yet out in the audience, hidden in darkness, hundreds of people are still there. They're listening. They're feeling every note. They're part of the experience, even though no spotlight ever touches them. The absence of light is not the absence of a person. Perhaps you've become accustomed to treating every moment spent standing at the edge of the room as evidence that there's something about you that makes people not want to come closer. No one starts a conversation, so you assume you're boring. No one asks how you're doing, so you conclude you're not interesting enough for anyone's time. Half your body gets cropped out of the group photo, so you quietly decide you never truly belonged there in the first place. But what if standing at the edge of the room isn't a verdict on your worth? What if it's simply a place in the room, no more defining than any other place? Chosen one, this isn't a question you need to answer immediately. It's simply a question I'd like you to carry with you as we continue this journey together. Chosen one, let me ask you something honestly. How many times have you stood beside the refreshment table at a gathering, holding a drink, pretending to look at your phone, just so no one would notice that you were standing there alone? In Psalm 31:12. The psalmist writes that he felt forgotten, like one who is dead, like a broken vessel that no one remembers anymore. It is one of the most painfully honest verses in the entire book of Psalms about the feeling of being completely forgotten, even while still alive, still present, still standing there. What's remarkable is that the writer wasn't describing life in complete isolation. Many biblical scholars believe psalms like this were written while the author was still living among other people, surrounded by relationships, yet feeling entirely forgotten by the very community around him. That is precisely the kind of loneliness in a crowd we're talking about today. I once heard the story of a woman who attended her company's year-end celebration 3 years in a row. Every year she stood in the same corner beside the food table. She smiled whenever someone walked past, but not once did anyone stop to have more than a few polite words with her. By the 3rd year, the group photo from the party was posted in the company chat. She noticed she was standing at the very edge of the picture. Half her body had been cropped out by the frame. She said what hurt wasn't being cut out of the photo. It was realizing that the photograph perfectly reflected where she'd spent the entire evening. On the edge. Always on the edge. She also shared something surprising. She wasn't invisible at work. Her co-workers regularly asked for her help. They praised the quality of her work. They laughed with her during office hours. But the moment everyone stepped outside the workplace and entered a social setting where people were free to choose who they wanted to spend time with, she became the person no one chose first. Chosen one. You don't need to count how many gatherings you've stood through alone to know how real that feeling is. You've felt it deeply enough already. Perhaps for you, it wasn't a company party. Maybe it was a family wedding, where everyone gathered in little circles, laughing over shared memories, while you stood beside the refreshment table, smiling politely, even though you didn't truly belong to any of those conversations. Or perhaps it was a class reunion, where people embraced one another, took photos together, and caught up on each other's lives, while you waited quietly, hoping someone would remember to turn toward you. There is something unfortunate that people often hear in well-meaning but hurried encouragement. If you were more confident, more outgoing, more willing to start conversations, things would be different. Sometimes that's true, but sometimes it isn't. Sometimes the problem has nothing to do with a lack of confidence. There are rooms where, no matter what you do, people's attention will naturally settle elsewhere. Not because you're missing something, but because human attention can only focus on a handful of things at any given moment. Chosen one, there's a familiar moment that often comes after returning home from a gathering like that. You stand in front of the mirror and begin asking yourself difficult questions. Was my outfit wrong? Was the story I told too boring? Or maybe, there's simply something about me that makes people not want to come close. In 1 Samuel 16:7, we're reminded that people look at outward appearances, but God looks at the heart. This verse is often connected to the story of David, the youngest and least expected of Jesse's sons, the one his own father didn't even think to present when the prophet Samuel came looking for Israel's future king. Many believers understand this passage as a reminder that the way people evaluate one another, based on what they notice first, is not the only way a person's worth can be seen. I once knew a young man who, after feeling overlooked at gathering after gathering, decided to reinvent himself. He changed the way he dressed, buying more expensive clothes. He changed the way he spoke, memorizing funny stories so he'd always have something entertaining to say. He even changed the way he laughed, practicing a louder laugh because he believed it would make him easier to notice. Each change carried the same quiet hope. Maybe next time will be different. One evening, he spent nearly an hour standing in front of the mirror rehearsing a funny story he planned to tell at a dinner party. He practiced the pauses, the timing, exactly where people would laugh. When he finally told it that night, it worked. People laughed. A few even patted him on the shoulder and complimented him. But only moments later, someone else began another conversation. The attention shifted away. And once again, he found himself standing there, wondering what he needed to do next, just to hold on to the few seconds of attention he'd finally received. After nearly a year of trying everything he could think of, he reached an unexpected conclusion. The problem wasn't any of the things he'd changed. Some gatherings still left him unnoticed, despite dressing better and becoming more outgoing. At other gatherings, when he wasn't trying particularly hard at all, someone would naturally spend the entire evening talking with him. At first, that realization confused him more than it comforted him. If it wasn't his clothes, if it wasn't the way he spoke, then what was it? It took him a long time to accept that perhaps there wasn't a single formula that explained everything. And that exhausting himself trying to discover one only left him more tired without bringing him any closer to an answer. Chosen one. The fact that a room doesn't notice you isn't evidence that there's something wrong with you that needs fixing. The attention of a group on any particular evening depends on countless things you cannot control. Who is preoccupied? Who already knows whom? Who is carrying their own private concerns? Who happens to be caught up in another conversation? None of those things are measuring your worth. Yet another unfortunate message, often hidden inside hurried encouragement, is this. If people overlook you, you must need to improve yourself, change so you'll be easier to accept. But the truth is far more complicated. Not every moment of being overlooked points to something you need to repair. Sometimes it's simply one evening, in one particular room, where everyone's attention happened to be occupied by stories that had nothing to do with you. Chosen one. This is the hardest part to talk about, and I won't avoid it. There comes a moment after leaving a gathering when someone sits alone inside their car in the parking lot. Without starting the engine, they simply sit there, looking through the windshield toward the house where the party is still going on. The lights are still glowing. The music still drifts outside. Once the windows are closed, it becomes softer, but the rhythm is still there, just enough to remind them that everyone inside is still laughing, still enjoying themselves, without realizing that someone quietly slipped away. In Psalm 142:4, the psalmist writes, "No one notices me, no refuge remains to me, no one cares for my soul." These are the words of someone speaking with complete honesty about the depth of feeling forgotten, even while surrounded by other people. I once heard about a man who found himself sitting alone in his car like that for the third time in a single month after another social gathering. He didn't cry. He simply rested his hands on the steering wheel, left the engine off, stared toward the lights inside the house, and wondered, did anyone in there, even one person, notice that I had left? He said the feeling wasn't anger. It was more like an unanswered question hanging in the air. If I had never shown up at all, instead of quietly leaving, would anyone have noticed the difference? He sat there so long that the car's interior lights shut off automatically. In the darkness, he watched silhouettes moving behind the windows of the house. Laughter spilled outside each time someone opened the door to step out for a cigarette. Not one of them glanced toward the parking lot. Chosen one. Maybe you were placed there to see, not to wait to be seen. There is a kind of loneliness that only reveals itself when you're standing in the middle of a room filled with laughter. Not the loneliness of sitting by yourself within the familiar walls of your home, But the loneliness that comes in the middle of a crowd, standing there while conversations flow all around you, while hugs are exchanged, while people greet one another with warmth, yet no one walks toward you. No pair of eyes lingers long enough to ask, "How have you been?" This kind of loneliness is much harder to explain than simply being alone. Because if you ever told someone that you felt lonely in the middle of a crowded gathering, they might look at you with confusion, or worse, assume you're exaggerating. After all, you were surrounded by people. How could you possibly have been lonely? But you know the feeling was real, even if no one else could see it. Chosen one. If you've ever stood in a room like that, a wedding reception, a family reunion, a company party, and felt almost invisible, then these words are for you. I'm not going to tell you that next time everyone will suddenly gather around you. I'm not going to promise that the people who walked past you that evening will someday come back, apologize, or regret overlooking you. Those are comforting promises. But no one has the right to make promises about a future they cannot control. Instead, I'd like to invite you to consider something different. A different way of understanding what it means to stand on the edge of a crowded room. Stay with me for a little while, not because you'll miss something if you leave, but because perhaps no one has ever invited you to look at this feeling from this perspective before. Imagine a stage with a single spotlight shining on one small area. Whoever stands inside that light is immediately noticed. Everyone looks in that direction. Meanwhile, the rest of the room remains in darkness. Yet it is still full of people. Life is still happening there. The only difference is that the light simply doesn't reach them. In Genesis 16:13, we meet a woman named Hagar. She believed she had been completely forgotten. Many believers return to this passage because it reminds them that in the very place where Hagar thought she was most alone, she encountered the one she called the God who sees me. Chosen one. Before we go any further, there is something important to understand. Not standing in the spotlight does not mean you are absent from the room. The spotlight has limits. Human attention has limits. But your existence is not limited by wherever the spotlight happens to shine. Think about a concert. The lights illuminate the singer, the pianist, the band. Meanwhile, hundreds of people sit quietly in the audience, hidden in the darkness. No spotlight rests on them. Yet every one of them is fully present. The absence of light is not the absence of life. Perhaps you've become accustomed to treating every moment spent on the edge of a room as proof that something about you pushes people away. No one starts a conversation, so maybe you're boring. No one asks how you're doing, so maybe you're not interesting enough. Half of your body gets cropped out of the group photo, so maybe you never truly belonged there in the first place. But what if standing at the edge of the room isn't a verdict about your worth at all? What if it's simply a position, just another place to stand inside the same room? Chosen one, you don't have to answer that question right now. Simply carry it with you as we continue. Let me ask you something honestly. How many times have you stood beside the refreshment table at a gathering, holding a drink while pretending to check your phone, just so no one would notice you were standing there alone? Psalm 31:12 says, "I am forgotten as though I were dead. I have become like broken pottery." Few verses describe the feeling of being overlooked more honestly than this one. Notice something important. The psalmist wasn't writing these words from complete isolation. Many biblical scholars believe these psalms were written while David was still living among other people, still surrounded by relationships, still living within a community, yet feeling completely forgotten by those around him. That is exactly the kind of loneliness we're talking about today. I once heard about a woman who attended her company's holiday party 3 years in a row. Each year she stood in the same corner near the food table. She smiled whenever someone passed by. But not once did anyone choose to stay and talk with her for more than a few polite moments. During the third year, the company posted the group photo afterward. When she looked at it, she noticed something painful. Half of her body had been cut off by the edge of the picture. She later said that what hurt wasn't the photograph itself. What hurt was realizing that was exactly where she had spent the entire evening. On the edge. Always on the edge. She wasn't invisible at work. Her co-workers appreciated her. They often asked for her help. They complimented her work. They laughed with her during office hours. But once everyone stepped into a social setting where people were free to choose who they naturally gathered around, she became the person no one chose first. And perhaps, in that entire room, the one person who is actually in the right position to notice the other person is you. Chosen one, let me be clear here, because this is where people often misunderstand. I'm not saying that being overlooked is somehow a better place to be, or that you should hope to remain there forever. I'm not saying that the pain of feeling invisible will disappear simply because you notice someone else. What I am saying is much simpler than that. Even while you're carrying that pain, you possess something that the person standing in the spotlight often does not: the ability to notice what everyone else is overlooking. Chosen one, what does it look like in everyday life to become someone who chooses to see others instead of constantly waiting to be seen? It doesn't mean you stop longing for connection. It doesn't mean you stop wanting to be noticed, loved, or welcomed like every human heart naturally desires. It simply means that while you're waiting for those things, you no longer have to stand frozen, staring only at the empty space where no one has walked toward you. Think about two people standing along the edge of the very same room. The first spends the entire evening counting how many people walked past without stopping. With every passing minute, the weight grows heavier. The second stands in exactly the same place. But instead of counting those who never came, they begin noticing whether someone else in the room is wearing the same expression, whether someone else is also standing quietly by themselves in another corner. Neither of them can control whether anyone chooses to approach them that night. What they can control is how they spend those moments of solitude. Will they keep collecting more evidence that they're invisible, or will they allow their perspective to stretch just a little farther? Both people experience the same evening, the same room, the same silence. No one approaches either of them. Yet one leaves carrying another piece of evidence that they don't matter. The other may leave carrying something entirely different. The quiet realization that even though no one noticed them, they noticed someone else. And perhaps that by itself carries its own kind of meaning. Chosen one, you may be wondering how you could even recognize someone else who feels the same way in a crowded room. Usually, it isn't nearly as complicated as you imagine. It may be the person standing just outside the larger group, looking down at their phone a little longer than necessary. It may be the one who smiles whenever someone walks by, only for that smile to quietly disappear the moment the person keeps walking. It may be the guest who arrived late and lingered near the doorway, almost as though they were deciding whether to leave before anyone noticed they had come at all. Every time you find yourself standing alone, it isn't proof that you've failed. It may simply be another moment in which you're learning how to stand with quiet strength, even when no one is standing beside you. Chosen one, I'd like to leave you with a question. You don't have to answer it today. Suppose the next gathering feels exactly like all the others. No one walks over first. No one starts the conversation. Would you still be willing to become the first person to notice someone else? even while you yourself still feel unseen. I'm not asking that to place another burden on your shoulders. I'm not suggesting you must always be strong, or that you should always be the one giving when your own heart feels empty. Some evenings you simply won't have anything left to give, and that's perfectly okay. But on the evenings when you do have the strength, there may be one small thing you can do without waiting for someone else to do it for you first. Chosen one, before we bring this conversation to a close, slow down with me for just a moment. Picture the person sitting alone in that parking lot once again, after another gathering. This time they sit behind the wheel just as before. They look back toward the house. The lights are still glowing. The music is still drifting through the night. But after a quiet pause, they start the engine. Not because the evening turned out completely differently. Perhaps no one came over to introduce themselves. Perhaps they still spent most of the night standing alone beside the refreshment table. Yet one small thing had changed. Across the room, they noticed someone else standing alone, and they walked over. They asked one simple question: "Are you doing okay?" Before driving away, they look back at the house one last time. Not with the heaviness they carried before, just one quiet glance, as though closing the chapter on an ordinary evening, instead of carrying home another fresh wound. The headlights come on. For a few brief seconds, the dark parking lot is illuminated just enough to reveal the road ahead. The car slowly pulls away, leaving behind the lights, the laughter, and the music that continue without interruption, just as they always would, whether someone leaves or stays. Chosen one, you don't have to wait until an entire room changes the way it sees you before you're allowed to feel even a little lighter today. That sense of relief may begin with something much smaller, not because more people finally noticed you, but because you chose to notice someone else, perhaps in a way no one had ever noticed you. There is a difference between leaving a gathering empty-handed, carrying nothing but the ache of being overlooked, and leaving with one small moment that mattered. One question you asked, one kind glance you offered, one moment when you chose not to stare only at your own emptiness. From the outside, those two evenings may look exactly the same, but inwardly they are entirely different. One simply adds another layer to the weight you've been carrying. The other, even if the pain remains, allows you to leave with something just a little lighter to hold on to. Chosen one, before we part today, let me leave you with three things. That room and the people in it may never realize how invisible you felt, and no one has the right to promise you that they ever will. But the way you see the place where you've been standing, the edge of the room, can begin to change today. Instead of seeing it as proof that you're somehow less valuable, you may begin to see it as a place that allows you to notice what those standing beneath the spotlight often never see. And because of that, you can stand with quiet confidence today. Not because the room finally noticed you, but because you no longer need to remain there simply waiting to be noticed. You are free to lift your eyes and begin noticing the people around you. Chosen one, I know that the next time you walk into a gathering, you may still find yourself standing alone beside the refreshment table. No one may come over to start a conversation. I can't promise that will change next time, or by any particular date in the future. But I can tell you something with confidence. You can become the person who notices someone else in that very room, someone carrying the same quiet loneliness you've known yourself. And whether anyone recognizes that moment or not, it still matters. Chosen one, I know many messages like this make promises too quickly. They promise that one day you'll finally shine, that every eye will turn toward you, that those who overlooked you will someday regret it. I won't make those promises. because I cannot know whether those things will happen. What I do know is this: the way you understand the place where you're standing can begin to change today, whether that room changes or not. If these words remind you of an evening when you felt invisible, perhaps you could share them with someone else. Someone who may be getting ready to walk into a gathering tonight, already afraid they'll once again find themselves standing alone. Not because you'll lose something if you don't, but because sometimes the greatest comfort a person can receive is simply discovering that someone else has stood in that same corner before. No matter how many rooms you've stood on the edge of, no matter how many times you've been cropped out of the edge of a group photograph, your worth has never been measured by whether the spotlight happened to shine on you. Your worth is found in the simple fact that you're still here, still choosing to move forward, even when no one is walking beside you. And if you'd like, leave a comment below with the name of one place where you felt invisible. You don't have to explain the whole story. It doesn't have to be polished. It only has to be honest. You don't have to spend the rest of your life standing on the edge of that room, waiting for a spotlight that may never turn your way. May the next time you walk into a crowded room, you stop searching to see where the light is shining, and instead become a light for someone standing quietly in the shadows.